Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to Analyst presented to you by Vajiram and Ravi. Here we discuss 7 articles in 2 different sections taken from 2 newspapers, The Hindu and Indian Express, consolidating your current affair preparation for UPSC CSE at one place. In the first analysis section, we discuss liberation from bonded labor. We discuss in the context of completion of 50 years of anti-bonded labor law. We take a comprehensive look at the historical evolution, legal framework and challenges of the issue of bonded labor. Next up, we discuss the topic of women in legislature. We discuss this in the context of swearing in of Manipur's first women Deputy Chief Minister, Ms. Nemcha Kipgen, which is casting a spotlight on women representation in legislatures across the states. Next up, in the prelims pointer section, we discuss 5 articles in respect of your prelims 2026 with a lot of value addition, so stay tuned. Starting with the first topic, liberation from bonded labor. We discuss this in the light of 50 years of completion of Bonded Labor System Abolition Act passed in 1976. The Act completed 50 years in this 2026. We discuss this in the context of our syllabus GS2, which talks about mechanism, laws, institution and bodies created for the protection and betterment of the vulnerable section. And who would be more vulnerable than these bonded laborers who do not even have the dignity or the choice to whom should they be selling their labor and at what cost? They don't even have that basic criteria of choice, and thus we are going to read about it. But you understand that this is not a new thing. Bonded labor has been a part and parcel of our history as well as the global history. We have read about bonded labor and the forced labor in the modern period. Even Arthashastra mentions that bonded labor was part of one form of punishment that was given by the state. In the Gupta period, we have heard about forced labor system, which was known by a very peculiar term known as Vishti, which was basically a means of the state to extract labor out of a person, out of the citizen or the subject of the state as an economic tax. It was a form of taxation also. Then we come to the medieval period and the Persian time. We come across a term known as begari, which is basically a summation of 2 words, be and gar, which means be means without and gar means either rozgar, as you know, or whether we call it as the work. So they were working but without any payment. They were not having choices. So state used to coerce them, the feudal lords or the iktadars as well as the zagirdars. They had the power to coerce people to focus, to do some work without any payment, without any choice. So this was a system of begari that was prevalent in the medieval India. Even in the regional kingdom of Maratha, there used to be certain forms or alteration of this bonded labor which used to be called as Vet begari. Basically again a summation of 2 words, Vet coming from this Vishti word which was prevalent in the Gupta period, and then again begari, which means the forced labor. So it was a part and parcel there. Even after the onset of so-called modernity, when British entered India in 1757, they continued to be the issue of slavery in India. But by the year 1833, because of the movements of slave and bonded labor in across the world, they had to abolish bonded labor in the year 1833. Once that was done, India saw another phase of bonded labor altogether, which became the part of Girmitya system, as we know in history. Girmitya is basically another term for the agreement. It was a colloquial word which changed the word agreement into girmit. Agreement, girmit, agreement, girmit. That's how people who were given certain money in advances, they signed on an agreement that they would be working for so and so period at so and so places. They were known as the Girmitya labor, who went from the mostly the eastern part of India to the various plantation areas of British colonies in Trinidad, Tobago, Mauritius, Seychelles, like these countries they went. And there they became permanent residents there because they were having no other choice to come back. They did not have enough finances to come back. So it was a perpetuation of this bonded labor in the modern form of slavery. It was a part and parcel of freedom struggle also. We saw anti-Khoti movement started by none other than Bhimrao Ambedkar, who founded the Indian Independent Labour Party in the year 1936 and was working against this Khoti system, which was basically again authority given to the Khots or the Zamindars of the ancient period or the medieval period. They were called as Khots, so they were extracting labor or forced labor out of the peasants. This system was known as Khoti system, and this B.R. Ambedkar ji was against it, and he launched this anti-Khoti movement through the aegis of his party known as Independent Labour Party. So as we saw that it was part and parcel of our history. With the enactment of our constitution in the year 1950, we established new constitutional right, especially Article 23 and 24, which was against right to exploitation. And in that we abolished the forced labor, we abolished the begari system as well as abolished the child labor. This was the brief history of it, but if we come to the present day, what exactly do we mean by bonded labor? How do we define it? As per the International Labour Organization, they defined it under the Convention number 29 of ILO, which defines forced labor as all work or service which is extracted from any person under the threat of a penalty and for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily. So there are three things: that the work could be done by any person, it could be done in any field, that means it could be either industry, it could be agriculture, plantation, and then it is under a threat of penalty, that means penalty could be monetary or penalty could be physical harm. Then the third part of it is that the person is not offered himself voluntarily. What does this mean? This emphasizes on the idea of informed consent. That for example, if somebody had argued and proposed to you that if you work for me at this price point for this much hour, then you are giving consent to him. But then if the so-called employer of yours did not disclose all the details of the information and you as a worker did not sign up for all the works that is later burdened upon you, then it is also one form of forced labor. So it is a wide definition which is prioritizing the rights of the worker. This is given in the Convention number 29 of the ILO, which was enacted in the year 1930. Around 60 nations have ratified this convention. That means they have created laws to implement this convention in their own country. What does this mean? This means that the provisions of this convention, which include the Article 25 of this convention as well, which clearly states that this illegal extraction of forced or compulsory labor shall be punishable as an offence, as a penal offence, and it shall be an obligation of any member who is ratifying this convention to ensure that the penalties imposed by the law are really adequate and are strictly enforced. So this convention would become legally binding if a state has ratified it. India has also ratified this convention. So we have a law in our country known as Bonded Labor System Abolition Act of 1976. So this today in this 2026 year, we celebrate the 50 year of this particular act, which was formulated in the consequence of ratification of this convention. That is the brief overview of why we are discussing this today. Now, to understand that what do we mean by forced labor? We have just said that this is the definition of what is included, but also it is important for us to understand that what is not exactly forced labor. Does that mean any involuntary work is forced labor? No. State has the authority to exact some certain work in lieu of compulsory military service if they want, or a purely military character. They can exact certain work out of a citizen in a coercive manner or in a non-voluntary manner if it is done for the normal civic obligation. If you are a part of a civil society, you not just have certain right, you also have some duty. So it is part of your obligation. You would be required to do certain things whether you are willing or not. Then if some work has been done as part of a conviction in a court of law, if you have watched enough Hindi movies, you would recall one dialogue that they say, "Kaide ba mushakkat." Kaide ba mushakkat. Kaid means imprisonment. Ba mushakkat means with. Ba means with, and mashakkat means effort, that you have to be imprisoned and you would have to do certain effort in the imprisonment, in the jail. That means you would be either cutting rocks or building furniture or something like that. So work within imprisonment would not be constituted as a forced labor. It is very well allowed under this convention also. In case of emergency, in case of any communal service that is required for the betterment of the community as a whole, so all of these aspects are allowed as per this convention. They are not constituted as forced labor. Apart from this convention number 29, there are other certain conventions which regulate this idea of forced labor. For example, we have UN Convention on Slavery, which has already been ratified by nations of South Asia like India, Nepal, Bangladesh, others. ILO's worst form of child labor convention 1999, which include the number 182. These are also one of the famous convention regarding the forced labor. There are certain 8 conventions of ILO, out of which 6 have been ratified by India and 2 have not. This is already a previous year question. A homework for you is please identify which are the number of these 2 conventions which have been passed in ILO but not ratified by India. Now, what is the impact of forced labor? Why are we discussing it so much? If you understand that it is something that is being done, extracted out of a person involuntarily, it is bound to have certain impact on him, as an individual, social impact, psychological impact, because he has lost his dignity. There is no right to work with dignity. There is no right to opportunity as a livelihood, in the livelihood. But if we see it at a macro scale, around 28 million or 27.6 million to be precise, these many people are engaged globally today as of 2026 in forced labor. Even these many people do not have right to choose whether they want to work and for whom. The cost of it is 236 billion US dollar. Most of it is extracted by the private sector. It is not the state who is coercing them. Earlier we saw the example of state, for example in Gupta Empire. It was a form of taxation. But now 63% of this extraction of forced labor is done by private entities for profit, and profit, humongous profit, for because they have extracted $236 billion out of them. 60 countries have only ratified this convention called convention number 29. Most of others, for example 140 or so, they have not even ratified it. So imagine the scale of exploitation going around the world regarding this. But we need to understand that the government has been cognizant of it, and we have taken a lot of steps to abolish the system of bonded labor or forced labor in India. As a part of our original constitution also, we had article 23 which prohibits traffic in human being, and other similar form of forced labor including begari are prohibited, and any contravention of this provision shall be an offence punishable in accordance with law. So this is the enablement in the right, and then we would have to develop a statute for it or a law for it, and we did, which was called as a Bonded Labour System Abolition Act, BLS-AA, which was enacted in the year 1976, and here we celebrate 50 years of it. The impact of it has been that around 3 lakh people have been taken out of this bonded labor system. They have been rescued from it, and they have been rehabilitated across the various part of the society. They have been made the valuable member of the society. We have implemented certain central sector schemes also to actually implement the rehabilitation of them. Once they are rescued, there must be some economic opportunity that is given to them, some compensation is given to them, so that they can start a new lease of life. Under this scheme, it is completely fully funded by center because it is a central sector scheme. There is no contribution that is taken from the state. The provision of this is that earlier they used to give 10,000 rupees as a lump sum amount as the initial amount. Now that has been raised to 30,000 rupees to every person who is rescued from this bonded labor. But it doesn't end there. There is also a gradual enhancement of this compensation that is given to them on the basis of that how badly they were treated during that, their gender, the extent of violence that they were faced. All of these together would determine how much of the graded assistant rehabilitation they would be given, whether 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, subject to the severity of exploitation that they underwent. But there are certain challenges that remain. It is not, we have understood that it is not the case that since we have implemented a law, we have enacted one, it doesn't mean that bonded labor has ended in India. It has not. And that is why precisely the Hindu covered this article today in the Ground Zero report, where it discussed a lot of case studies about how it is still prevalent and how people are running from pillar to post to extract those rehabilitation and rescue. To get to the root of it, we need to understand the causes of this slavery in the first instance. Why people are becoming a part of bonded labor in the first place. We understand that there has been a part and parcel of our history regarding the caste-based exploitation that existed in our country. There have been caste-based bondages. For example, a system known as balutedari existed in the majorly western part of India. It was known with different names in the other regions, but in western India, majorly Maharashtra, it was known as Bara Balutedar, which means 12 balutedars, which was basically the 12 communities of the country, 12 communities of the society, depending on the profession that they profess. For example, barber or carpenter or washerman. These people, they were given certain rule in the society that they would be giving these services. But for the services, they would not be paid in cash. Rather, they would be paid in kind, in form of whether they would be given some grain or certain protection from external threat. This was the arrangement. It was basically a system of interdependence. But what it evolved over the time period was that these community, they lacked the social mobility. What if the future child of these person belonging to these community, they don't want to continue with that? They were not allowed to discontinue it. They were not given the choice of livelihood. Because of this persistence on the basis of caste that they are born in, it became an exploitative system and changed its nature from just being interdependence to a caste-based exploitation system, part of the modern day bonded labor, part of the modern day slavery in India. Then we have varying form of exploitation. Some sections of the society are bound to certain tasks. For example, manual scavenging is a task which is mostly undertaken by the scheduled caste of our country. As per the Lok Sabha reply of the Minister of Social Justice and Empowerment in the year 2021, around 97% of all people who are employed today as the manual scavenger, they belong to the Dalits, they belong to the scheduled caste. Also, the scale of poverty is driving this cause of forced labor, of bonded labor. People, because they are so poor, they do not negotiate the terms of employment. They are so desperate for the employment that they sign up for things that they would repent later. The extent of poverty in our country has been declining over the past few years. We have seen World Bank also understanding it and acknowledging it, that from 16% to 2% we have reduced the ratio of extreme poverty in India. People who are living below even $2.15 per day, those number has reduced from 16% to merely 2%. But if you understand the scale of India, even 2% of our population, which is 140 crore, it is around 3 crore people who are still living below this $2 per day. If you understand the scale, the population is as close to the population of the whole of Canada, which is in itself the second largest country of the world. Not just this, not just the large scale discussion that we are having, we also need to understand the nuances of the regional and the sub-regional division of poverty here. We have these inequities across the region and even in the sub-regions. For example, if you take the example of Bihar, as a state, Bihar has one of the lowest per capita income in the country. As per the recent estimates of the economic survey, Bihar has around 76,000 rupees per capita GDP. Compare that to the national average, it is around 2.8 lakh. So it is around 25 to 30% of the national per capita GDP. It is already poor. Compare that even within Bihar, we have sub-regional inequities where around the specific regions of Bihar, for example, the Seemanchal region, which covers the district of Purnia, Kishanganj, Araria, these are among the poorest of the poor, and the extent of poverty there is around 60%. Around 60% of those families in those regions are living below 6,000 rupees per month. One family includes 5 people there. You understand the scale of poverty. These people would be happy to get whatever livelihood that they are getting for whatever pay, and in the end up being a forced labor. Then we have the issue of debt trap. Because people are poor, it leads to another factor of bonded labor, which is debt trap. As per the survey of Global Findex year 2021, 45% of Indian adults, they have taken access to credit in some form or the other, but around only a third took it from the formal sources. That means two-thirds of them, or 66% of all the credit that they took, it was from informal sources, which means usurious rate of return, very high rate of return, which led them to a debt trap. And to get out of this debt, they could even be called as a forced labor, or they would even be pushed into the forced prostitution. Then the lack of awareness and policy implementation are the persistent criteria, persistent issues in this abolition of forced labor in India. We understand that we have seen a lot of schemes that are run by government, we have laws, but the lacune lies in the implementation of it. We have understood the causes of it, but we need to understand where exactly we are failing. We see there is delay in rehabilitation. It is a part and parcel of the central sector scheme that we have to rehabilitate them. But even after a certificate is issued of rescue, rehabilitation is not done, as we are able to see in this case study of Odisha that is reported by today's The Hindu. That as per the socio-economic caste census that happened in the year 2011, Odisha government identified around 8,000 people that they had rescued out of bonded labor, but they have failed to reveal what action has been taken to identify and rehabilitate these 8,000 people. They have identified the poor people, they have identified the bonded labor people, but their rehabilitation status is not clear. This showcases what? That there is a failure of rehabilitation. We are just issuing them certificate, and once the certificate is also issued, they might even be turning their back upon it. We have bureaucratic negligence as well as denial. Once a status is issued, they might revoke the status of these bonded labor to avoid the responsibility of rehabilitation. This has happened. In case of Odisha, we see that there is a negligence or apathy at part of bureaucracy, where there have been instances that as per the law, there is need for creation of a corpus of fund of around 10 lakh rupees so that immediate relief could be given to the bonded labor. But in half of the district of Odisha, no such fund was created. If that is not bureaucratic apathy, what is? We have issue of interstate migration complication also. Once a migrant worker, he has become a bonded laborer is in another state, then there becomes confusion because of lack of standard operating procedure that which state should take up the responsibility of rehabilitating them, whether the origin state or the state where he was engaged in the forced labor. These are all the issues that can be solved at the bureaucratic level, that can be solved by policy implementation, but there needs to be certain steps that we have to take regarding it. What is the way forward now? If we understand that as per the Supreme Court's judgment in Olga Teli's case, Supreme Court identified that right to life does not only mean animal existence, it also means right to a dignified livelihood. And to implement that, we need to simplify first of all this process of rehabilitation. Right now what happens is that once a news is come out that some person has employed certain forced labor, the police goes and as well as the labor department goes there, they rescue those people. Then there is a summary trial of those rescued people in front of the subdivisional magistrate. That happens on the basis of satisfaction of the summary trial by the subdivisional magistrate. He would issue them certain certificate that these are the rescued person out of the bonded labor. Once that is done, then they become accessible, then became eligible to get access of certain benefits out of the rehabilitation scheme. This is a complex and lengthy process. Sometimes what happens, we have seen that they have been rescued, they have been issued the certificate of rescue, but rehabilitation has not followed. There should be a organic integration between them, that right then and there should be a one-stop center where they are issued the certificate as well as the rehabilitation. Now, once that is done, there are also other things that we need to do. We also have to provide the graded rehabilitation. As we saw that first time, one lump sum amount, we give them 30,000 rupees, and on the basis of extent of the exploitation that they have undergone, they would be given whether 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, as depending on that extent. Sometimes what happens is that they are given the first installment of the first lump sum of 30,000, the following amount is not given. So there must be a complete integration of this process, and it should be a continuous process by which can be implemented by using of greater technology, by using of platform like Pragati that we use for the tracking of infrastructure project, so that we know real time how many people are getting what kind of rehabilitation services. So we can link the simplification of process with this e-governance aspect for implementation. Then we have to include the fifth pillar in our society. Fifth pillar, for example, the civil society organization known as Shram Vahini. There is one example of aid at action. These are organizations that working at the grassroots level to give and make aware these people of their rights of bonded labor and to expose the presence of bonded labor in the society. They must be included within the official policy formulation and implementation stage to ensure better outcomes of it. And then taking the timely action for fixing accountability, as we saw in the case of Odisha, that once the fund is not being created, once they have been rescued but not given rehabilitation, there must be proper accountability of these officials who are responsible for it. And we can have comprehensive financial inclusion also as a major plank of redevelopment. For example, right now we see the success of financial inclusion in India. We have created excellent digital public infrastructure in form of UPI. Around 640 million or 65 crore transactions are happening daily through the UPI. But that is just one part of financial inclusion. What about the access to formal credit? As we saw, 2/3 of them don't have access to it. What if we can utilize this UPI based technology to give more formal loans, so that they are not falling into the debt trap and thus not becoming a part of forced labor? We have to work on those directions by utilizing this technology platform there as well. There is need for social changes. After all, we have implemented the law for 50 years now, but we are yet to see the positive or at least the expected outcome out of it. We need to supplement this legal change with a social change, a movement at the grassroots level, for example, which is being led by Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, who has started the idea of Bachpan Bachao Andolan, which is basically an idea of saving children from the forced labor and rehabilitating them into the education. It is also has to do with the awareness of the media as well as the investigative journalism that is taken up by media houses. For example, BBC Media Action Group, they have created one documentary and raised awareness on the issue of labor rights. They have said a very catchy line that they are majdoor and not majboor. Majdoor means labor, majboor means out of compulsion. One can be majdoor, one can be earning their livelihood from whatever means, but they not necessarily have to be a compulsory or forced labor between them. To sum it up, we have very famous song from Gurdas Maan in Punjabi, which says that Roti hakdi khaiye ji bhave boot polisha kariye. That means that one has to earn their livelihood through dignified means. One has to be earning the bread that they're eating through dignified means, whether they do it by doing boot polishing. That is even also a form of dignity of labor that has to be recognized, but it cannot be forced labor. It cannot be a livelihood without dignity. That is a summation of it. To ensure that happening, we need greater prominence of state, which can be doing it by means of greater social security net. For example, giving them UBI access, which is universal basic income or partial basic income, so that they have something to fall back upon. We have certain method of formal credit system, as well as inclusion of this fifth pillar of the state to include awareness as well as implementation of this policy action. That was about this topic of bonded labor. We have discussed this comprehensively and are giving you one question that you can write at your level and get it evaluated from your mentors. Moving to the next topic of women in legislatures, we discussed this in the context of Ms. Nimcha Kipgen becoming the first deputy chief minister, women first deputy chief minister of Manipur. It is giving us an opportunity to understand the issue of representation of women in legislatures across the state as well as the central legislature, which is Parliament of India, and how is it faring compared to the other peers, other nations, and what more things that we can do to enhance their representation as well as enhance women leadership at the helm of the nation. If we understand about the fact of the matter, what exactly is the status of women representation in the Parliament today? As of the 18 Lok Sabha, we have 74 women MPs who have got elected to the Lok Sabha. It is actually a decline from the previous 17th Lok Sabha, where we had around 78 members. So the number revolves around the 14%. Now it is 13.6. Earlier it used to be 14.2% of the total membership of Lok Sabha is given by women. But even that is not as bad as the situation there is in the states. You see the average percentage of women legislature in the state is around 8%. There are certain exceptions, of course. We have Tripura, which has around 15% of their legislature. 9 out of the 60 MLA that they have in Tripura are female. But then there are other backbenchers also. We have Nagaland, which in the year 2023, for the first time, elected 2 women MLAs. Imagine the plight of history when in the year 1926, we had the first woman MLA in India, who was Miss Muthulakshmi Reddy. She was the first person who got become an MLA in India. She was elected from the Madras Legislative Council, Madras Legislative Assembly. That was 1927. They are making for the first time MLAs in 2023. 100 years have around passed, but still women representation has not taken up the stage that it should have. And compared to the global peers, if we see, USA has around 29% of women as the legislatures. 46% of all the MPs in South Africa are women. 35% of all MPs in UK are women. But compare that to India, it is around 13.6%. Dismal figures. But we understand that it is not that we started bad. We started with 15 members of the Constituent Assembly being women. We elected our first chief minister back in the year 1963 by Ms. Sucheta Kriplani. So we started on an optimistic note, but we have not reached where we should have. And why does these numbers even matter? Why does this percentage matter? Because it is not just about representation, it is about leadership also. If we see that if we are not allowing at least 50% of women at the central leadership, at the leadership in the legislature, we are violating the natural law because they constitute around 50% of the population. They are not being given the natural and substantial rights, which is also dignified under the Article 15, which prevents the state from discriminating against any person on the basis of race, religion, caste, sex or place of birth. Gender here is actually one of the cause that they are not being allowed to become the member of parliament or member of legislative assembly, it seems, because the numbers showcase so. Then we are not able to see a major rise in our global development indices because of our dismal performance on these index. For example, if you take the case of Global Gender Gap Index released by World Economic Forum, India ranks at a dismal 131 out of 148 countries. We have even fallen back from 129 that we ranked last year. And why so? If we understand the 4 parameters of Global Gender Gap Index, at economic participation we are doing at least on par. We have 37% of female labor force participation. Educational attainment, we have rising gross enrollment ratio. Health and survival, we have rising we have declining maternal mortality rate, rising life expectancy. We are doing fine here. But what about this political empowerment? We are clearly not, and that is reflecting in our position in the Global Gender Gap Index. If we are going to improve this, if we are raise the number of political empowerment of women, if we raise the number of elected legislators, we are going to see improvement in these ranking also. And it is argued that it would also cleanse the political system. I am not being misogynist here, I am not being stereotyping women, but statistically data has showcased that women candidates have lower criminal charges, women candidates are less likely to be involved in money muscle politics. So if we have more number of such women MLAs, the political system of our country would also improve. As of now, we have around 46% of the MPs who are sitting in Lok Sabha, they have criminal charges against them. Once the proportion of women MPs or MLAs increases, this proportion of criminalization of politics is likely to get reduced. And there are other significant reasons for enhancing women leadership. If we talk about, we are discussing here women leadership and not just representation. We are not just concerned with the how many people sit there, as how many women sit there in the legislature, but also what changes do they bring to the society. If we see empirical evidence of it, Miss Esther Duflo, who was a Nobel laureate, and she did a study in the year 2004 where she found out that wherever women were in the leadership, they allocated more money on water and education. It led to better outcome for girls and women in the society in general. It enhanced the outcomes, learning outcomes of education. It enhanced the implementation of this scheme. We have examples from our country as well. Ms. Chavi Rajawat, who is renowned as a person who brought transformative change in her village constituency from where she was elected as a sarpanch. She brought transformative change in the social indicators there. Then we are supposed to have greater gender sensitive policies. For example, issues relating to maternal health, nutrition, for example, medical termination of pregnancy act. If these laws are to be reformed, it is necessary by ethics and morality that we take the case from the women itself. We ask for their views about it. And if women are formulating such policies regarding such crucial method, it is going to have more better impact at the implementation level as well. Economic empowerment of women is also one of the probable outcomes of greater political leadership, because women who are elected as MPs, MLAs, ministers, cabinet rankings, chief ministers, they would empower other women to aspire higher. They would empower greater participation of women in the economic life, a greater labor force participation, and bring more GDP growth to our country. And then above all, compassionate governance is what we expect when women is at the helm of the leadership. And it is not me arguing that. The incoming Deputy Chief Minister of Manipur, she has to say that women in general are caregiver by nature. A caring mother nurtures a peaceful home, and from that foundation, peaceful communities and societies are built. She says it in the context of Manipur, which has been reeling under the pressure of a conflict between Kuki and Meitei community. And we saw this happening in the past as well. When Miss Jacinda Ardern, she was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and Christchurch attack happened in a mosque. She went herself to console the victims, and the victims had to say about her that her tears were real. That leads to showcasing a strength of solidarity that a state would be showcasing towards the victim of any hate crime. They showcase that states full strength stand beside these victims, whatever religion they belong to, whatever community they belong to, and this was possible because of women at the helm of the leadership. And this is one classical case that you can cite whenever you want to argue about women's role in leadership. Then we can have social and long-term changes out of this greater participation of women at the political level. We are going to have greater social impact. We are going to have intergenerational changes. For example, the first thing that comes to your mind whenever we say the word Netaji is the image of a politician like this. But why does it not become Netri Ji, which is basically a woman leader? If we are going to have more women as the political leaders, we would normalize the term of use Netri Ji rather than just Netaji, who is just always a man with a moustache, always folded hands. We could always have women leaders like Miss Jacinda Ardern as well. That is the idea of why we need women at the helm of the leadership. Government is also cognizant of it. We all know that there have been certain steps we have taken over the time period. We have 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, which brought 33% reservation for women at the local level, panchayats as well as urban local bodies. And we have had state legislature who have gone beyond this mandatory 33%. They have enhanced the participation of women to even 50%. Bihar has already done that. We have 106th Constitutional Amendment Act, which is Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam, which has brought 33% reservation at the level of state legislature, at the level of Lok Sabha, as well as at the level of Union Territory of Delhi. Why is this necessary? Because organically we see our ratio of women participation has been around 5%, 10%, and right now till around 14%, a very gradual change. We need a leap of faith to reach to this level of 33%, and thus these legal changes are being formulated. What are the provisions of this Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam? We need to see that because already a question in prelims has been asked about it. They say that there is a sunset clause which is it is valid for 15 years. It is just starting as a reservation policy for 15 years. Of course, it can be extended by the parliament later on. There is supposed to be a periodical rotation of the representation of women. So it would be changing on the basis of delimitation exercises, and it would be applicable after the next census is conducted after the year 2028. On the basis of that, if you try to solve this question, this question says that provision will come into effect from the 18th Lok Sabha. It will not. So once we eliminate that, we arrive at the right option of C. But we understand that we talked about that it is just a legal change, and we are yet to see remarkable result from it, because it is an exercise destined for the future. What more do we need to do? Because there are certainly challenges with this approach. There are challenges in enhancing women leadership by solely saying this legal approach. We have seen case that we are just talking about giving them ticket, but are we working on their winnability as well? Are we doing the capacity building of these women leadership once they become the neta and the ministers and the MLAs? Would they able to ensure good governance so that people vote them again? We have a lot of work to do there. Then it might reinforce the stereotype that women are just being made the candidate for the election not on the basis of their merit but because of a reservation system. It might rather, instead of solving the cause of women, it might rather reinforce the stereotype. We have seen that women as a group is non-homogeneous. Not all of the women are as vulnerable as the other. Not all of the women are as lucky as the other. We saw Miss Rabdi Devi becoming the Chief Minister of Bihar, not solely because she was a good leader, but because she happened to be a wife of another famous person. Then how can one expect other women who come from much lower caste, who come from much lower socio-economic section of the society, would they be in the same pedestal as these dynasty politics? It might not be. So we have to work on the capacity building of women so that they are able to ensure the social change that we are seeking. We have issue of unaddressed state disparity. As per this law, there has to be a limit of 33% minimum Lok Sabha members should be women, but it does not address the cause of the issue of interstate disparity. As we saw the case of Tripura versus Nagaland, they have 9 MLAs, they have only for the first time had two MLAs as women. The interstate disparity is not going to be solved by this proposed mechanism. We are also very aware of the Vidhayak Pati phenomena that we could see. Right now we have Sarpanch Pati, where the husband of the elected Sarpanch, who happened to be a woman, her husband would be taking the oath of office as well as doing all the necessary formal work, where the woman who is actually elected, she would be a mere rubber stamp. The Vidhayak Pati or Sansad Pati is another phenomena that we see in the offing once this reservation is implemented as the only way of empowering women. We have also have to understand that it is just catering to the Lok Sabha as well as State Legislative Assembly. What about the upper house? What about the Council of State? Rajya Sabha also has lower participation of women, around 15% only. Geeta Mukherjee committee, which was set up to address the issue of women leadership, they had actually recommended for a reservation for women in Rajya Sabha, and that is something that we have still yet to do. Also, we saw it opens another window of dynasty polity as well. I have already discussed it. Now, what to do about it then? What is the way forward to solve the issue of lack of women leadership? First of all, we have to, rather than going for a top-down approach where we are directing to elect more women MLAs, MPs, we are rather supposed to work from the bottom-up approach where we are directing the parties that they should themselves give ticket to more women who would be winning on their own merit and solve the issue of crisis. We have seen this happening in the case of Biju Janata Dal of Odisha as well as TMC, where in case of Biju Janata Dal in Odisha, they gave more tickets to women, and the proportion of women MLAs and MPs that they elected was more than 35%. It was an organic method. It was based on the merit of those legislatures, and they would work very hard to get the blessing of the voters again. And this would be an organic method of development of leadership. Then we have to reduce barriers to the politics. As NN Vohra committee also highlighted that there is an issue of criminalization of politics. We have read a greater use of muscle and money power, which are leading to the winnability of those candidates. If these barriers to the politics are reduced by the method of, let's say, state funding of election, as suggested by Goswami committee already, then we would have more chances of women getting elected. Then we have to bring the social change, that we as voter also are valuing the person who is actually doing the developmental politics. For example, we have greater acceptance of the work. We saw Miss Supriya Sule, who is an MP from Maharashtra, Baramati, she was actually won the best parliamentarian award. Because of these reasons, they should be elected the leaders again, not because whether which party does she belong to, which caste does she belong to, which dynasty or which house does she belong to, rather on the basis of her effort within the within the constituency, within the parliament. And to solve this issue of lack of democratic approach in promoting representation of women by just reservation, we can have a pilot project whereby we can have dual member constituency. Earlier, the choice of the voter would be restricted if we reserve a constituency solely for the women. We can have a pilot project where 2 members could be elected from one constituency. And if that pilot project works, we can extend that to the national level. We can take cue from the global best practices. For example, nations of Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, they have 45% representation of women in their parliament, not because they have reservation in the parliament, rather they have something known as a legal quota within the political parties, that parties are by law directed that they have to give these many amount of tickets to the elected women candidates. So that might work in the top down, in the bottom up approach, as we discussed. And out of all, we have to fast track the implementation of the law that we are implementing, the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam. It should be fast tracked by soon conducting the census that we are about to do. By taking these steps, we were poised to enhance the gender equity in our parliaments as well as state legislature, and we can become a more gender just society as envisaged by our founding mothers of our constitution. We have this practice question for you that you can practice and get it evaluated from your mentors. Starting with the next topic, freebies as well as welfare state. We discussed this in light of a case reaching Supreme Court where Tamil Nadu Power Distribution Corporation has challenged certain provision of the electricity amendment rules. They have said the electricity amendment rules, section rule 23 of it, which asks them that the tariff that the state corporation are charging, they must be cost reflective. They must not give freebies, electricity in form of freebies. They must not subsidize the tariffs. They must not subsidize the bill of the electricity consumer too much. That is going to impact the revenue of the state. That's what the bill wants. They say that there must be a no revenue gap between what is the annual revenue requirement as well as the estimated annual revenue that they are going to get from the approved tariff. There must be parity between them. There must not be over subsidization of that. The only exception allowed is in the case of natural calamity. Tamil Nadu Power Corporation has actually challenged that, and they say that they operate under a public welfare system. They have socio-economic policy directive of enhancing electricity consumption, and if they implement this rule, they would cause an exponential tariff shock to the consumer and would reduce the electricity consumption, thereby reducing the economic growth of the state. Why it is so important and what is its constitutional position with respect to welfare state as well as the legality of these freebies, let's discuss that. But first we understand what is the status of electricity consumption in India. It has risen over the past few years. It was around 1161 kilowatt hour per person in the year 2021, but it has now risen to 1460 kilowatt per hour by the year 24-25. Still, although increasing, it is still around 40% of the global average, and that is why we have a policy goal as per the draft national electricity policy that we have to increase our consumption to 2000 unit by 2030 and 4000 unit by 2047. Then we would be at the rank of a developed country because they are also using this much of amount of electricity to conduct their daily activities. And we are supposed to do this because we are a part of a welfare state. It is given in our DPSP, Directive Principle of State Policy, which under Article 38 wants to promote the welfare of the people so that socio-economic political justice is ensured as well as inequality in terms of status and opportunities reduced. How do we do that? By giving greater access to the means of development of livelihood, the means of production. They should be equitably distributed. The electricity forms one crucial means of production, one crucial means of increasing ease of livelihood. Thus, it is very important for the state to enhance its consumption, and that's why states have been subsidizing it. But Supreme Court has actually questioned it, that what kind of developer culture we are developing. What is the distinction between people who are capable of paying electricity charges and people who are marginalized, and will it not amount to some kind of a appeasement policy? That is what the Supreme Court Chief Justice of India has questioned, and rightly so. Although it is not illegal for the states to develop freebies or state to subsidize the electricity, we also have to understand the timing of it, whether these are just being done right before the election to woo more voters. Although even in that case, Supreme Court in the 2013 Subramaniam Balaji case has held that the election manifesto promises like these freebies or reduction of bills does not amount to a corrupt practices under the Representation of People's Act. It is not a corrupt practices. So legally it is allowed that state can pursue certain and ask voter to vote for them if they are going to give them any economic benefit in the future. It cannot be restrained because the implementation happens across post-election via the budget, which is a perfectly legal phenomena. But to ensure that there is parity between the promises that they are done and they are practical also, Election Commission of India gave guidelines in the year 2014 where they said that party must justify the promises why they are making that, and they must also specify that source of funding that they would use to actually finance the promises that they are making in the election. And when they are not able to do so, when they are not giving reasonable justification for all the freebies that they, or the soaps that they give to the voters just to get more votes, it leads to the problem of unsustainability in the finances of the state, and we are seeing it across the state. Recent RBI report also shed light on it. The recent RBI report on state finances have held that 16 states have breached the FRBM limit, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. It has led the limit of 3% of fiscal deficit for the state, and 16 states have breached this limit. And then the consolidated debt of the state, it is also rising. The limit as per this FRBM Act again is 20%, but most of the states, the average of those states is 28%. Some states have less than 20 also, but average of all states combined, it is 28%. What does this lead to? This lead to greater burden on them because they have to pay more interest, and the cost of the finances that they take to finance the productive infrastructure investment also, even that cost of finances is rising because they are now in a perpetual debt trap. After this 16th Finance Commission recommendation, the Finance Commission has actually done away with something known as revenue deficit grant. So even to meet the revenue expenditure from the revenue receipt that the state is having, if there is certain deficit between them, then state earlier used to have access to the revenue deficit grant from the center. After this post 16th Finance Commission's recommendation, they have done away with the revenue deficit grant. So even now, the state are going to be even more burdened if they continue to do certain exercises of freebies, giving more revenue expenditure instead of using that money judiciously on public infrastructure, on focusing on the long-term growth. And this is a classic case study that we have. State of Punjab, it is facing a severe chronic debt crisis because they have taken up too many welfare schemes in the form of revenue expenditure, where they have given 200 units of electricity for free. They are financing more health infrastructure. Instead of financing health infrastructure, they are paying more insurance premiums, although good in their own sense. But if we talk about the case of the fiscal sustainability, it is an issue. As per the records, 4.17 lakh crore rupees is the amount of debt that the Punjab state has to bear, and then it is representing around 46% debt to GSDP ratio. If 100 rupees is the total GSDP of Punjab, 46% of that has to go into the form of debt. They have to pay that much amount of debt. It is around half of their GDP only. And then revenue deficit of Punjab is also very high at around 28%. In some states like Uttar Pradesh, it is negative. They don't have a revenue deficit, they even have a revenue surplus. So if finances reach to such scaring level, then it becomes a cause of concern, and we have to rationalize the use of these subsidies as well as the freebies that we use. Moving to the next topic of RTI Act versus DPDP Act contradictions. Recently, a case has reached Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has sent it for constitutional bench hearing because of contradiction that exists between the section 81J of the RTI Act 2005 as well as the section 44 clause 3 of the DPDP Act 2023. What is this all about? We all know that RTI Act is the sunshine law of India. It is promoting more transparency in the governance, where people can ask questions from the administration and they were supposed to get answers for that. But this DPDP Act, which is Digital Personal Data Protection Act, came passed in 2023. It is actually has a provision which is overriding the section 8 of RTI Act. What does section 8 entail? Section 8 is basically the exemption from the disclosure, that for certain causes like these, the information would not be divulged if it is affecting India's sovereignty, security or strategic interest, if it is leading to contempt of court, if it is breaching the parliamentary privileges. Such informations would not be divulged, and under that one special section of clause 81J had certain provisions which talked about public interest as the primacy. Earlier, what was the case? The section 8 originally allowed the withholding of personal information only if it had no relationship with the public activity or interest. If no public interest was served by that information would not be divulged. Or it disclosed resulted in unwarranted invasion of privacy. If the disclosure of that information led to unwarranted invasion of the privacy of the official concerned, then it would not be divulged. But it had certain proviso that The section included a public interest override, that the public information officer, the PIO, who is responsible for divulging that information, if he thinks that permitting such disclosure was satisfied, that larger public interest would be justified by this disclosure of information, he would allow disclosure of that information even if it is leading to privacy invasion, even if it is having larger public interest. If it is serving larger public interest, he would promote public interest over the privacy. What has changed now is that this section 44 clause 3 of DPDP Act has changed the equation, where it is giving primacy or priority to privacy over the larger public interest. That is largely the change. So in this context, Supreme Court has referred this issue to the constitutional bench, and they have also said that they might have to define also that what exactly constitute the personal information that should not be or should be divulged. After this section 44, they have removed this override power of public information official. Now he would not be disclosing any information which relate to the public personal information. Now there is a blanket ban on divulgence of certain informations. The impact of it is that this enables rejecting requests concerning public official, what procurement has been done, audit report, as well as public spending. All of them are classified as personal information and are not divulged, because they might, as per the PIO, they might violate the privacy of that individual. Because privacy is given priority over the public interest, thus these information is not divulged. Thus it is a death knell, as is said by the scholars, to the RTI Act provision. Also concerning are other provisions of this DPDP Act. For example, they kept journalists as the primary data fiduciary. What is data fiduciary? Fiduciary is basically the entity which is giving certain information on the basis of trust. You have trusted somebody with your information, and that entity is called as data fiduciary. If that entity now as a data fiduciary is violating your trust, is breaching your trust, is now sharing that data, they might be penalized under this law of DPDP Act, and penalization could be to the level of 250 crore rupees. Now from a media house to expect to pay up such hefty amount of penalty, it would actually amount a chilling effect to the media. Chilling effect means they would now think twice before publishing anything which could be said to be a cause where they have breached the trust of the person by divulging such information. So this is having an impact on the investigative journalism also, and this is also showcasing a contradiction that is existing in our policy, that while government is allowed to process such data and divulge such information, citizens are not allowed to, and they would be penalized under this data fiduciary clause, as well as the public interest is being given the less priority compared to the privacy of the government officials rather than the private officials. And this is the whole concern regarding the issue of contradiction between DPDP as well as RTI Act that has to be now heard by the Supreme Court, and judgment would be passed. But from our prelims perspective, we need to learn certain facts also, prelims pointers regarding the previous case of Central PIO Officer, Central Public Information Officer 2019 case. In that, Supreme Court has already held that privacy should be respected. The personal information should remain private unless there is involvement of public interest. If it is necessary for the larger public interest, then information might be disclosed. That is what Supreme Court has held. So this would form the bedrock of the new constitutional judgment that would come from the bench. Now other aspect of RTI Act should also be implemented in the right spirit to avoid this contradiction. Now the question is that section 8 of RTI is allowing certain powers to the PIO that you may disclose. Now that is being restricted by the DPDP Act, that now you cannot disclose because it would violate privacy. That is the whole issue. But what if we don't use the section 8? Instead of having this default mechanism of not allowing information, why are we not utilizing the section 4 of the RTI Act, which is in fact promoting the proactive disclosure, that whatever information is there with the government body, why do they have to wait for certain people to file an RTI and then as per their whims and fancy give their reply? Why are they not proactively disclosing the information on their website to greater enhance the social capital that they would have with the people? People would now start trusting the government, because government would be proactively displaying all the information regarding to the budget, organizational function, other key documents. These should be prioritized rather than just a default mechanism of using section 8. we should prioritize section 4 here by doing proactive disclosure, and we must use the appeal mechanism as well as digitization of this record, so that there are no unnecessary delays in divulging information even when it is perfectly legal to divulge such information. Once that is done, it would enhance the implementation of RTI Act in the right spirit, which is actually the sunshine law of India. Moving to the next topic of Demwe lower project. This is basically catering to the prelim section, where they ask us question on the location of dam, the state as well as the river that they are built in. It is in news because it has recently received environmental clearance from the expert appraisal committee who have done their environmental impact assessment, and they have given an extension of this green clearance or this environmental clearance to them. From our exam perspective, we need to know that the location of this dam, the Demwe lower project, is on the river Lohit, which is again a subsidiary or a tributary to the river Brahmaputra, as well as it is located in a crucial position of Kamlang Tiger Reserve. It is located there, which is on the Kamlang river. This tiger reserve is on that river, but certain area of this project is covering under this Kamlang Tiger Reserve, although the project itself is on the Lohit river. So don't be confused. Important thing about that is that this tiger reserve having vegetation of both kind, whether it is moist evergreen tropical forest in the foothill as well as temperate forest in the higher elevation at the mountainous level. Also, it is part of the Eastern Himalayan biodiversity hotspot, which is again part of two biodiversity hotspots that are in India. One is in Eastern Himalaya, another is in Western Ghats. It is also the famous habitat for the white-billed heron, which is again a critically endangered species, which is also the second largest living species of the heron after the giant Goliath heron, which is famously found only majorly in Africa, also in some part of the Southeast Asian country. So this is important from our environment perspective, but from our Indian geography perspective, we also need to know that this Lohit river, which is basically the left bank tributary of Brahmaputra, what are the other right bank tributary of Brahmaputra, we need to know where exactly is this project located, and how they have asked question. If we see that they have asked question that about the location of the dam, whether Ghat Prabha is located in Telangana, no, it is located in Karnataka. Gandhi Sagar located in Madhya Pradesh. Indra Sagar, in which state it is located, not in Andhra Pradesh, again Madhya Pradesh. Maithon Dam, on which river, in state of Chhattisgarh, no, it is located in Jharkhand. Like that, we need to solve certain questions, so these information would come handy. Also, they have asked specific questions about Lohit as well as Lohit and Brahmaputra. Which of the following is a tributary of Brahmaputra? Through which state are these rivers following? So we have to solve certain questions like this. And once such topics are repeated in the news, you have to make good notes out of them, which are value-added notes. For example, these are the previous year questions that you already knew. You could have made such notes about them, that Indra Sagar Dam is located in this state, in this river. Hidkal Dam, which is also known as Ghat Prabha Dam. It is located on Ghat Prabha river, which is again a tributary of Krishna. If a dam is located on Barakar river, the name of the dam is Maithon. We also need to know of which river is a tributary of, which is Damodar river. So like that, today we noted about Demwe. It is located in Arunachal, which is on the river Lohit, which is again a tributary of river Brahmaputra. Next day, if you are seeing any question about Pulhasti, you must write down that what is the name of the dam, what is the state of it. Like that, over the time period, your notes would agree, and you would be able to search certain questions that would give you more than 2 marks in the paper. Then it comes in 2026 of prelims. Moving to the next topic, which is Nilgiri Tahr. It is regarding the species in use. Again, important for our prelims because this is an endangered species, and UPSC has a tendency of asking such question. What we need to know about is that it is the only caprine species. What does it mean? It is part of the bovine family or Bovidae family. It is looking like a deer to you, but it is not. It is actually a goat. That is what emphasized by this Bovidae family that it belongs to. It is majorly found in the tropical mountains of southern India. That is its only habitat. It is found in the Western Ghat. The most famous location of Nilgiri Tahr is the Iraviculam National Park, which is located in the state of Kerala, and it has around 700 to 800 population of it. In total, we have around 3100 Nilgiri Tahrs in India. Out of them, 700 to 800 are located specifically in this one national park known as Iraviculam National Park that we need to remember. Importantly, you understand that despite this national park being in Kerala, the state animal of Nilgiri Tahr is actually the state animal of not of Kerala but of Tamil Nadu. So also in Tamil Nadu, it is located at various famous locations. For example, Mugurthi National Park, it is located, another habitat of it. So that's what we need to remember, that it is located in Western Ghat. It is an endangered species. It is a species of goat, and the criteria or the characteristic feature of it is that it is a diurnal animal, that it is functioning during the day and early morning as well as the late afternoon. It is not nocturnal. That means it is not functioning during the night. Another important feature is that its local name is called as Varaidu, as well as it is part 1 of the it is in the Schedule 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act of India. That was about Nilgiri Tahr, but also from our exam perspective, they have asked certain species of goat, deer in the past also. For example, one year they asked about the musk deer. What is it? So we need to know about certain such species of goat which are confusing in nature. For example, these three species that you saw, Nilgiri Tahr, he was located in Western Ghats. Then we have three such species of goats which are located in the Himalayas. They could be Himalayan Tahr, Markhor as well as Changthang goats. The difference between them, although they are located in same locations, these two, they are near threatened as per the IUCN list. This one is not even mentioned in the IUCN list. Rather, it is very important from our art and culture perspective, because if you heard about the Pashmina, very famous Pashmina shawls of Kashmir, they are weaved in Kashmir, but the wool that comes from it come from this Changthangi goats, or called the Pashmina goat from Ladakh. That is the difference between them. All these Himalayan Tahr as well as Markhor, they are near threatened, but this is not even listed on IUCN status list. The question that came was on musk deer. Again, that is a species of deer, but again located in Himalayas, not in Western Ghats. It is known as musk deer because it releases a gland which is used very famously for the manufacture of perfumes and medicine. The IUCN status of it is same, endangered, as per was with the Nilgiri Tahr. Right, so you have to compare and analyze that where is it located, what is its specific feature, how threatened it is in the perspective of biodiversity conservation. This is musk deer for you, which is endangered and used for perfume, again located in the hilly region of Jammu Kashmir, Himachal, Uttarakhand. That's why they asked this question, that where would you find it? Askot is a place in Uttarakhand, you would find it there. Gangotri, we know it is a place in Uttarakhand, you would find it there. Kishanpur, no, it is located in the Terai region. Manas, again located in Terai region. So we would not found it there. 3 is eliminated, 4 is eliminated, again 3 is eliminated. Answer would be A, 1 and 2. That's how you kind of solve this question. Again, this was about deer. There is also another species known as blue sheep, which is known as Bharal, which is also located in Himalayas, interestingly, but its status is less concerned. It is not a goat, it is not a deer, it is a sheep. So there are few species that we have covered here. They are your consolidated notes for these species. You can refer them, revise them, and be able to solve the question. Moving to the next and the last topic, Safdarjung Tomb. It is a very beautiful monument located in the heart of Delhi. Safdarjung Airport you would have also seen, that is also near to it. It is actually an example of late Mughal architecture because it was built in the 18th century. And we need to know about it because they ask certain questions about Mughal architecture. They might ask that what is it made of? Of course, it is made of white marble as well as red sandstone, as we can see in the image. Also, it is formed in the basis of Char Bagh style of Mughal architecture, where they had water-based channel in between these 4 patterned layout of the garden. The Safdarjung Tomb is actually the last enclosed garden tomb in Delhi. Tradition of Humayun's tomb, it started in the 16th century. It is far less grand in scale, of course, because right now in the 18th century, when this was being formed, Mughal were on a decline. It was built in the year 1753 to 1754 as the mausoleum of Safdarjung. It has pavilion of some smaller pavilions. For example, it has parts known as Moti Mahal, Badshah Pasand or Jungle Mahal, which had their own purpose. Jungle Mahal represented that it was a palace in the wild. Badshah Pasand, that means it was the king's favorite. Moti Mahal means it was a pearl palace. It is the example of the late Mughal architecture 18th century as we discussed. But then what is about this Safdarjung? Why do we need to know about it? Who is this person? We saw that it is a mausoleum of Safdarjung. Who is this Safdarjung? Is that a name? No. It was actually a title adopted by Mirza Mukim Abul Masoor Khan. Very difficult name. You only remember Safdarjung, but more importantly, you remember why we remember him, because he was the second Nawab of Awadh. The first Nawab of Awadh, who was Burhan ul Mulk, Mr. Sadat Khan. That was again his title. Burhan ul Mulk was his title, Sadat Khan was his name, who set up the empire of Awadh, or actually became the first Nawab of Awadh. Nawabdari of Awadh was set up by this person in around the 1720s. After that, this person, Safdarjung, became the second Nawab of Awadh. And once he became the Nawab of Awadh under Muhammad Shah Rangila, once he died, he actually went again to Delhi. And there, when in Delhi after 1748, under the ruler of Ahmad Shah Bahadur, when Ahmad Shah Bahadur was the Mughal Emperor of India, he became the Grand Wazir of India, or the Prime Minister of Mughal India, and adopted the title called as Wazir-e Mamlae Hindustan. Hindustan ke all mamlas were under this person. Wazir-e Mamla-e Hindustan. This was the name of this person. Safdarjung was his title, and he was a Nawab of Awadh. That's what we remember. But when we talk about Awadh, you also remember one very famous name known as Shuja'ud-Dawla. He is the same person who was part in the Battle of Buxar of 1764. This person, Safdarjung, was actually the father of Nawab Shuja'ud-Dawla. So he became the third Nawab of Awadh. After this, Ahmad Shah Bahadur was deposed as the king. This person, Safdarjung, he went back again to Awadh, and then he died there. But his son, Shuja'ud-Dawla, who had a lot of influence at the center, at the Delhi Sultan, at the Mughal court, he actually sought the permission from the Mughal emperor at that time and built a mausoleum for his father, Mr. Safdarjung, and that is why the name of this mausoleum or tomb is known as Safdarjung's tomb, which was constructed by Nawab Shuja'ud-Dawla during the reign of Ahmad Shah Bahadur for the person Safdarjung, who was the second Nawab of Awadh. That is all that you need to remember, apart from the fact that it was built of red sandstone as white marble and follows the typical charbagh pattern, and also it is an example of the late architecture. So whenever the British were to say to India that Indians were in a dark stage, or 18th century was a dark age before British came, it was actually not a dark age, because we saw such remarkable types of example of architecture were still flourishing in India. That's about in this topic of Analyst. Please keep watching, keep studying hard. Best of luck.